this has been indeed a very rich discussion. We certainly have not exhausted the issues related to IP, but I think both panels have provided pointers at what might be important in this debate. I just open the parenthesis because I know that Pedro has a train to catch. I'm glad you stay until now because you can go back with saying that the last word was about congratulations to the Commission. So at least you didn't make the trip for nothing. But if you have to escape and catch your Thalys, we'll all understand. Okay, so what we heard this morning, which focused very much on valuation of IP, markets, the role of business, and what we heard in the second half of the morning, which was more about the geopolitics, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, and what is this world shaping. One fact that was recognized very, very clearly is that we are at a historical period. Okay? This is a time where the whole notion of IP is changing in front of our very, very eyes. What Pedro called a once-in-a-generation opportunity, what Teresa called a sea change. So we're very lucky to be at this place, at this time involved in this kind of issues. Yet, with this additional visibility comes additional challenges. One thing which is clearly recognized is the value of IP. Who says value says market, because the market is the instrument by which you can estimate that value, you can create transaction mechanisms, you can allow people to buy and sell intellectual property and hopefully make the best out of it. This works if it's adequately regulated. There's no efficient market without some degree of consultation between stakeholders, and some degree of enunciation of what would be clear rules. Business can evolve in many difficult environments. They can cope with different tax rates, they can cope with different labor legislations. One thing they cannot cope with is unpredictability. If the environment changes every 6 months, business cannot take place. So what we are discussing and what has been discussed today about IP is how to provide some degree of predictability in a highly moving environment, which is the world of innovation. So that's part of the challenge. And this market for IP, and all of our panelists recognize it directly or indirectly, is an imperfect market. We are at the beginning of the creation of the market. So it's a dysfunctional market. And dysfunctional markets create opportunities. There are some actors that will take advantage of it, and for good reasons. They will contribute to transforming this market. But it is also a task of decision makers, of governments in particular, of international organizations, to reduce the dysfunctional aspects of these markets and make them efficient markets in the longer run. Transparency, discussions in the public arena is clearly a way of doing that. At the same time, the need for confidentiality, for protection of innovations is part of the game. So we have indeed an environment which is much more complex than in other areas where we had dysfunctional markets and trying to diminish transaction costs, increase predictability. So this has been underlined in more than one way. There is one thing which I think also transpired from both panels, which is that, of course, one of the reasons why we are in this room today is because we have some interest in IP. We are even passionate about IP. We believe that this is something crucially important, and we are happy, excited about participating in that. Yet, it would be wrong to think that we're going to convince the rest of the world that IP is important if we start talking IP. And Thierry underlined it, and Teresa underlined it. You have to start with what is in the mind of people you're trying to convince. And if you talk to governments, you have to start with jobs, you have to start with growth, you have to start with competitiveness. If you talk to entrepreneurs, you have to talk about predictability, you have to talk about making profits, making margins, being innovative. If you talk to the pirates or to the NGOs, you have to adopt a different language where you start not from your view of why IP is important, but what is important for them. And always start with a question and not with the answer. So we have a long way to go beyond our respective passions, to get rid of jargon, acronyms, and all of our panelists in both parts of the morning have made a great effort to stay away from jargon, so I'm personally very grateful. as an ignorantus in the area about this conscious effort, but it's going to be a very important part of convincing the rest of the world, all sectors, that what we're discussing today is crucially important for them. And last but not least, a common thread between the two panels, and most eloquently developed by Deputy Ray in her keynote intervention, is about harmonization. And as a mentor of mine was Sylvia Ostry, who was the Ministry of Trade and Industry of Canada a few decades ago, used to say there's a big difference between singing in unison and singing in harmony. When you want to harmonize, you don't want everybody to sing the same song. You recognize differences, and you identify the similarities through which you can reduce those differences towards something which is manageable, which will always be different. There will be cultural differences, there will be legal differences, but there's a number of axes that can be pursued by which these dissimilarities can be reduced. And again, this is about harmony and not unison. The idea whether China follows the third path, whether it looks at what's happening or takes the best of what is happening on both sides of the Atlantic, remains an open question. But we should foresee, we should plan for a system that will be resilient to this kind of uncertainties. And this is about convergence, it's about coherence, which are the other words which have been used. And last but not least, my impression, and I hope the audience shares it, is that indeed we are facing a sea change. But in that sea change, the potential of the Atlantic Ocean should not be underestimated. Everything that will go along a higher degree of cooperation, seeing eye to eye, as Pedro would say, and making these views, which will remain different to many extents, more harmonious, and a public good offered to the rest of the world, will indeed contribute to make this sea change more palatable to those who see IP on the dark side of the force. So on your behalf, and including not only our panelists now, but the panelists we had before the break, I would like to stress that these are not the people who think about IP. These are the people who, like you in your respective organizations, make IP. They make the IP of the future. They contribute to shaping the world. They are on the front line. And as we heard, it's not easy. You have to face those long days, and then when you return, face resistance to changes of people who don't want to be trained to new systems and believe in the old fashion of doing things. So for all that, I think we should all be admirative and grateful, and I am. Thank you very much.